everyone. I'm Jon Evans. Welcome to another episode of One on One. If you're a lover of the outdoors, then chances are you know our guest for this week's interview. It's Jim Shockey, the world-renowned wildlife adventurer, hunter, and guide. Jim has hosted and produced several television programs on hunting and on wildlife, and they've aired on networks that include the Outdoor Channel. Jim is a wilderness outfitter as well. He's an expert on folk art. He collects tribal art, and he even founded the Hand of Man Museum in his native British Columbia, Canada. Jim also served his country in the Canadian Armed Forces. Now you can add thriller writer to Jim Shockey's extensive resume with the brand new release of Call Me Hunter, a novel about a gifted child and his life in the dark underworld of art collecting. And Jim Shockey set the novel, at least in part, right here in North Carolina. Jim Shockey, welcome to the One-on-One with Jon Evans podcast.
I better live up to all those accolades up front there. But yeah, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
This is not just a very good book, Jim. It is a great book, in my estimation. Why did you write this? With everything that you have done in your life, everything that you have accomplished, why turn to being a thriller writer?
When I was 10, I knew I'd be a novelist. I knew I'd have a museum, and I set a course for the next half a century to accomplish those goals. I started the museum then, my first seashells and pretty rocks, insects. And I started writing my first novel when I was 10. It was horrible. I mean, I had no story to tell. And I realized pretty quickly, you can collect for a museum, but you cannot be a novelist. You need to, for me, I knew I needed to live life first, hone the craft, the skills. You can't just start writing. You need, I wrote 1,000 articles before I wrote it. So I needed to do that. And I picked it up. I wrote the first lines in 1993. Zhivago was dead. I hunted him down and I killed him. Yeah, and the first page actually. And I sat there thinking, okay, it's time to write, but it wasn't. I hadn't lived. I needed another 30 years. So there's writers can come out of university with their degree in literature and they can start writing and they go research but that's not I can't. I needed to have a story to tell. So I lived my life essentially to do what you're holding in your hand. That's the result of a life lived.
I have told friends that when this comes out, they have to rush to go get it because I have not thought as much or gone as deep in thought when reading a book since the Da Vinci Code. It really had me at the twists and the turns and everything like that. What did you want the reader to experience while going from page to page?
I wanted them to learn some things about life. You get one life. So I wanted those lessons to be learned, but I knew that it had to be in an entertaining way. And just like our museum, it's entertainment first, and education comes as a byproduct of that. I wanted people to learn about tolerance, to learn about understanding things that you thought, or this is the way it is. No, it's not necessarily the way it is. It might be a cultural perspective on the way it is. We all know what's right and wrong. Every one of us inherently knows that. But we tend to say, especially now in today's world, that this dichotomy, or this way or this way, it's like never the twain shall meet. But that's often when we listen, it's just our cultural perspective. And it's not a smart person is saying this, but I believe this, and my group, and then we talk to each other all the time. This is what we believe, and we hate this person. So I wanted to take stereotypes and flip them and create a cognitive dissonance so that well, that can't be because I believe in this, but I can't believe in that because that's not very nice. But I don't believe in that, but I kind of relate to that because that is nice, in a really simple form. So inspiration, I wanted people to understand you get one life. Let's live it. Tolerance, it's not a big world anymore. Let's start accepting different points of view and understanding, talking. So it's a bigger picture. The novel is entertainment, that education. Plus, yeah, I mean, the art world is a fascinating art world. We should be proud of what we've created as human beings in our history, instead of apologetic all the time for being human. The art that we've created is amazing. And I mean, just so many levels in this. Children that feel outside of the bell curve, that can't read, but it's because they're not interested in that. They're not interested in video games, so they're not in the bell curve. They're outsiders, and that doesn't mean they're dumb. It can mean that they're actually geniuses, like the character in the book.
You have been all around the world on your adventures. Why did you set part of this novel in our part of North Carolina, in Pinehurst?
Because my wife and I owned a house in Pinehurst. We still do. At the Country Club in North Carolina, CCNC, we right across from the clubhouse there's on the lake. Everything, like, the novel had to be true. Good writing is honest writing, and so it's very honest when I'm talking about the grass carp slurping the grass cuttings on the surface of the lake and the wood ducks. That's why it's set there. It's honest, and also, as I said in the preface, I would love people to dig into this, dig as deep as you possibly can, and to find out what's not true about it. And I say it's like quicksand. The more you fight against suspended reality, the more you're going to sink into the quicksand, and then you're going to come to what conclusion? Wow,
I know you're a golfer. What's your favorite course over there at Pinehurst? I have my favorite. I've played about 6 or 7 of them. I have my favorite. What's yours?
Well, I mean, the Pinehurst courses are nice, but I way prefer our CCNC, our 2 courses there. Yeah, I mean, they're Cardinal and Dogwood. They played the U.S. Junior Amateurs last year there, and I'm sure they're going to be playing more big tournaments. But I mean, Pinehurst number 2. I mean, let's face it. You coming into those greens, was it Jack Nicklaus said it's like trying to drop a ball on top of a roof of a Volkswagen. I mean, I didn't find Pinehurst number 2 that hard, frankly. But they're dumbed it down for us proletariat golfers, so it's not like it's U.S. Open caliber. But CCNC, those 2 courses eat my lunch every single time and I'm not a bad, I'm like a 5 handicapper, 6 handicapper, but I sure don't look at when I'm playing on those courses. It's tough to break it.
I love number 2. I played 2 and 4, but the one I like, and I don't want to get off Call Me Hunter here, but if you're going to talk golf, I'll talk right along with you here. Pinehurst National was the one that I just fell in love with when I was there. It's the one course that I think just fits my eye, the way it sits up there. It goes down and just winds around all through those little sand hills. That's the one that I fell in love with. I like the other ones. I like the challenges, but National is the one, if given my preference, I'd go back and play tomorrow.
Oh, good. I plan to get out there fairly soon. I'll be centralized down at our place in Pinehurst in the near future. So I'll go try National. I haven't played that one. I played 9 and 8 and all those others, but I have not played National. So I'll put that on my list. But I need to practice first before I start duffing golf balls all over the place.
Well, if you have played them all, then you're going to enjoy Pinehurst National. I saw an interview you did where you called this an autobiographical abstract thriller. So I'm going to come right out and ask you here the question that interview didn't ask you. Are you Hunter? Call me Hunter. I mean, like there's I loved. I mean, I love the double on triple entendre. Right.
I mean, you can call me Hunter. That's. I mean, my favorite book when I was growing up. I was 10 years old, grade 5, reading J.A. Hunter. I mean, the name. It's not about hunting. It has nothing to do with Hunter. Although hunting for treasures, going around the world, looking for natural history objects. It's so autobiographical that there's many parts of Hunter, the character, and Sisu, the man of swords, and Icarus, that are autobiographical. That's why I say I'd love somebody to go dig it up, dig all you want, and you'll find photos that document. And it kind of giggle about it. They say, "Is it autobiographical?" And I say, "Well, I'd say 80% of it is truth. And the 20% that would put anybody in jail, that's the fiction part. So, I wink, wink. But again, it's fun. Like you just take somebody and say, okay, what is this? Is this real? And for you to compare it to Da Vinci Code, that's the highest praise, because I've always felt it was Da Vinci Code with a little bit of girl with a dragon tattoo and a touch of Hunger Games thrown in, and Spiela's Sense of Snow, the European novel from 40 years ago. But to Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown, I mean, that's high praise. Like I say, we can sign off now, and I'm not going to be able to put my hat on anymore.
Well, I'll tell you, as I was reading, my wife, because I've done interviews with so many authors this year, I just love talking to them. I write in little 30-second snippets, and you all write in 400 and 500 pages. But my wife saw me really concentrating and going back and turning pages, and she said, "Are you reading this for pleasure or for work?" And I said, "Pleasure now, work later." But she saw me concentrating. She said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Nothing's wrong. I'm fascinated. I'm challenged." And that's what it did to me as I was turning page to page.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love it. It's not meant to be a beach read. If someone thinks I can sit on a beach and read it in 2 hours, or 2 minutes at night, 2 pages, and go back to it. I mean, you'd end up starting over on each page every time. Yeah. So I love that you read it and understood the layers, because there's layer after layer after layer in that. Yeah. And
what was the first piece of art you collected, and what drew you to wanting to collect art? Hunter has got he sees color, everything brown and brown, brown and brown, but then he sees color in something that is artistically he's drawn to. What drew you to collect art?
I think, and it might sound a little bit woo, but I believe the spirit of the creator of the art piece, whatever it is, it doesn't matter whether it's flat art or musical. I believe their spirit is in that piece. So our museum, our Hand of Man Museum of Natural History, Cultural Arts, and Conservation, that's where I'm coming to you from our studio. But it's the vast majority of the pieces in here are artworks by people, and they, naive. I don't want to call them that, because it wasn't naive. It came from their heart. Now it's not Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel or Da Vinci. It's there, but they are just as valid. So there's a spirituality in every single piece of art when someone puts their heart into it. And every artist out there knows what I'm talking about, because that's what they do. And they create these amazing works of art that are beautiful that represent them. And then people don't recognize it, or don't see it, or don't feel it. But when you put together art pieces like in our hallway, down it's a big grand, we call it the grand reveal, when they open the sliding door and see this huge hallway with all these works of art. People that are switched on, that feel like Hunter does. He sees masterpieces and great works of art, pieces with soul. He sees it in color, where everything else in the world is brown and brown. People that have that sensibility, and it exists 100%, they'll have tears running down their eyes as they walk along these pieces, because every single work of art, someone put their heart and soul into it. Now, if they copied somebody, or they were trying, that's the difference between good art and not great art, is you copy. Okay, it's great. It's not inspired. And so for me, I've always, and sometimes, I don't want to say primitive, but not naive either. It's pieces that were made by people with big hands that, didn't have that fine touch, but they made it for their wife, for love, under a coil lamp. All winter they worked on it because it was dark in Saskatchewan, and gave it to his wife, a little picture frame or a table that he carved and did. Those things always drew me. I mean, I think it's because my roots are, my grandmother came from the Ukraine, my mother spoke fluent Ukrainian, and grew up barefooted, and my grandmother died at 99, 98. She still lived in the log house, the sod house, that her and my grandfather built in 1929. No running water, no plumbing. So I have I kind of like one foot in the, I can be with royalty over in Germany, and the other foot is deeply rooted in the ground. So it gives, again, the art, I can appreciate it. And I knew that from just young. My first piece that that I consciously collected of art would have been a totem pole, a model totem pole. And it was probably done by Arthur Shaughnessy, a Northwest Coast Kwakiutl carver from up in the north end of Vancouver Island, and at Quatsino Sound. And I still have it. I still have those, and I have all the pieces I collected from art.
Is there a dark underbelly to the art world in reality that you chronicle in Call Me Hunter?
Yeah, and I it's a bit of a metaphor for the world, and it's called, that organization is Our World,
Right.
and it's a, I think that anything that's good gets abused by people that are greedy. It doesn't matter greedy for what, power, greedy for money, greedy for the art, and those, they're enabled by people that in the art world that are so obsessed with the collecting that it becomes it becomes almost inhuman. They've lost their humanity. That their desire to own that piece is so great, and that's what fuels this organization, Our World. Well, that's kind of like the world right now, and that's what it's meant to be. Is, yes, the art world has an underworld. Of course it does. I mean, it's one of the top three. I think financially, the art, or was it fake art, is billions and billions of dollars. It's next to gun running and drugs. So there's yes, 100%. There's a underbelly to the art world.
I understand Jack Carr played a big role in this Call Me Hunter book becoming a reality. But how did you go about submitting the idea, getting it approved, and then finally getting it published? Was it Jack that played that crucial role for you?
Yeah, Jack, I'd love to call him a good friend. He's a friend for sure. I was standing with Jack at the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus when he got the call on his cell phone, along with John Dubin, his good friend, and it was from Chris Pratt. Before Terminal List was even out yet, Chris Pratt had called him, and he got the call, and he was like, it's Chris Pratt, and he took the call. He came back and he said he's optioning Terminal List. It's going to be a TV show or movie or whatever at the time. I don't know that they knew what it would be, a series or a movie. So I was with Jack when he got that call, and I remember when we were talking to him. I've always wanted to be a novelist. Like I said, I started at 10, and Mark Sullivan, another one. I was with him when he first got the okay to publish his Purification Ceremony, his first novel, and he's written how many bestsellers since. So, Jack, I consider a kindred spirit in the outdoors, and when I told him then that I have a novel, I just have to sit down and write it, because I hadn't written it yet, but I had in my head. I'd been doing it for a lifetime. That story was there. I just needed to sit down and get it down. And so yes, he was, he inspired me at that point, and Mark Sullivan too, because they got novels published, and I knew, okay, I can't put this off anymore. I have to sit down and get this out of my head. It's filling my hard drive now. It's and I was running out of time. I mean, I couldn't keep traveling 306 days a year, traveling around the world. I would never get it done. So I had to stop, make the decision to, okay, sit down and write. So when I wrote it, first person that I was thinking of was Jack, because by then he's best-selling author, and I know he's busy, and who wants to get a big fat manuscript that hasn't been copy edited, and it's a rough draft essentially. So I sent it to him, and he loved it. He said, I remember him talking to me. He said, look, I've got these books on my wall. These are, genre books. They all fit. He said, these books on this bookcase, and there's a few. He said, they created the genres. They started a new genre. They're just different, and they're that good. He said, your book belongs on that shelf. Yeah. And at the time, that version, I always envisioned it as a 3-book series. So I left that version he had, the original manuscript, with a cliffhanger ending, and he loved it. He thought it was great. But then once it's great. Someone tells you it's good, whatever. What does, that and 25 cents will get you a coffee.
Yeah.
So now I had to get an agent, which was, that was a process because you don't get any. I didn't want to self-publish, which I could have, and I would have sold lots, and it would have been great, made some money, but it wouldn't have reached everybody. I needed a big publisher, and that means I needed a big agent, and so Esther Fedorkovich I got, but it was, she's got 13 readers that read this stuff before she ever sees it, and she did a Zoom call with me. And I never met her, and she had her piece of paper, and she said, I got to ask you, did you actually read or write this? And I said, I guess because of the cowboy hat, and I'm a little scruffy for a typical. I don't have a suit and tie. I mean, I'm not your classic author, I guess. And I said, yeah, 100%. And she said, well, my readers, and she said, quote unquote, are the most cynical, jaded bunch in the world because they've had to read so much not great works. But she said, this is what they wrote, and they had signed this guy. He's the next great writer. And so she said, so I'm signing you. We're going to do this. And then I go into the whole long version anyway. I hope we have enough time. But
oh yeah,
it because it verges on literature, right? Her first feeling was, well, let's put it as put it in that as literature and literary publishers. And 10 she sent to 10 sent back without reading it, and they said, basically they Googled me and said, well, he's got over 1 million followers on social media. He's some kind of little mini celebrity. He can't possibly be a author of literature. That was it. Never read it. Never considered the depth of it. Nothing. They didn't even just wrote me off as a stereotype, and or as a not stereotype, I guess, both, because you got to be a down and out professor depressed that can write literature. So it got gonged by the 10 publishers. So then we had no choice. It has to go into the commercial marketplace, and that's competitive. It's tough to get a book published in that world by the big publishers. I'm learning all this, by the way. And if I'm letting trade secrets go, I apologize to the big guys. I love life, and I love living, and I just find joy in this whole process, and I'm happy to share anything. But she submitted and was trying to get smaller publishers were interested, but that's not who I wanted. I wanted the best of the best and the biggest, and that's otherwise why do it? I wanted to reach as big a market as I can with this messaging, the lessons in the novel. We tried to get Emily Bessler. I mean, I tried every single angle to get to Emily because she's, I said earlier, the rock star of editing in that world. And that's who I wanted. I mean, I just wanted her. So, but you think you can just get a book to Emily Bessler? I think someone told me they get 1,000 unsolicited manuscripts a week, and there's 1.8 million books published every year. I mean, how do you get noticed? But it was Jack. And this back to the question, was he instrumental? And he truly, it was him, because Esther did everything she could, and we had Emily surrounded. She couldn't walk down the hallway with somebody not I'm a pretty motivated person, and obsessive about attaining goals. And I was to the point where I would have been standing outside, doing the movie stuff, standing there and, hello, Emily, and dropping copies of it everywhere. But he got a hold of her and said, Emily, this is good. And they never do that in the writing world, from what I understand since, because I guess, and I'm learning all this, that you wasted your agent's time by saying this is good because a buddy of mine wrote it, or
you don't want to take advantage of the situation.
No, and they respect you, but that doesn't make you a good talent finder. But he did. Jack, to his credit, he gave it to Emily and said, read it, and she did, and the rest is history.
Nyala is a journalist, and you write, you have to be a masochist to purposely choose journalism as a major, and even more of one to choose it as a career. Thank you for that, personally, being a journalist of almost 40 years. But why make her a reporter?
I mean, I went to Carleton University. It was a journalism school. I didn't take journalism, but I loved it. I've written 1,000 articles. So remember that the characters in this novel, even though, it's a her and not my age, that's still me. So what she's saying is what I believe. And, I think that it's, I mean, what a selfless career to choose to be a journalist, to dig out, find the truth. And I also sincerely believe that it's been hijacked, that has been hijacked. So true journalism, and she says it, she felt it died the day when Watergate, because suddenly you became celebrity, and that's what everybody's chasing. These is the big stories, the negative stories. Bad news sells for $2, good news sells for $1. So, and big corporations own the news, they own the distribution of the messaging. So, that's, it was no disrespect. In fact, it's the opposite. It's total respect for people like yourself. It is a bit of disrespect to the ones that buy into that, and that's what they chase around. I find it abhorrent. I find it does a disservice. It makes all of us on edge, and for money or celebrity in the case of the journalists. It's not even money. They don't even get that much. I guess they can write a book and make lots of money, but it's, a true journalist should be revered and held on a pedestal. And by the same token, a true journalist would hold those parameters of journalism in the highest regard and never, ever cross those lines. But that's not what happens nowadays. And that's why it was, and again, this is, the whole book is novel. If you're reading it at the levels, and there's level after level after level, that's one of them. It's a little bit of a social commentary, and journalists, they have access to the world. They can form public opinion, and they can use that for good, or, and to be fair enough, they have to pay mortgages. So if you want to pay a mortgage, you better get the dirt on the person, otherwise, and create, hatred, create animosity, divide. Never the twain shall meet. Keep them separated so they, just. To me, it's a sad state of affairs in the journalism world, and I probably killed myself for any other podcast for anybody that adheres to that. But
I've tried to adhere to it. The highest honor of my career is winning a Murrow Award. I won a Murrow Award for my podcast this past year. And of all of the different ones, I've gotten certificates and everything, but the Murrow Award means more to me because of the man's name on that award was a true journalist, and that's what I've tried to be for 40 years. And so you're right. I think too many people are going into it because they want to be on TV or they want social link clicks. But those who are objective, try to find the truth, offer both sides the opportunity to tell their story, let the audience decide, are becoming few and far between.
I agree. I mean, this novel already, and I'm, Jack said, he doesn't read any reviews on his books, but this is my first time novel, and he actually told me he's very interested to see what the reviews will be. But I read one the other day by a journalist who said they read up to the point in the book where Nyala, now this is a fictional character in the book, talking about a fictional character in the book, and nobody knows the two characters what they're going to develop into. No, I do. I mean, I'm the one that wrote it, so I'm creating a lesson here, and it's not necessarily a lesson that is going to get solved instantaneously this week in this novel, but the next one, I know what happens to the character that Nyala, who's opinionated. She made a mistake, but I don't want to say I give too much away in the second novel, but this reviewer / journalist said that he read to the point where the character, fictional character, said that her workmate was an insipid, gender-confused millennial with a man bun, right? And she said, I will never read this garbage. And it's like, holy cow, what is objective? Do you not see that you're the person that this is writing about? that you are the problem, because you're so intolerant that you won't even read a fictional character talking about another fictional character, that there may be actually a lesson in this that the character is going to learn, but you judged it already. Judged it, it's done. It's so it's, yeah. I mean, it's a sad, sorry state when you get that. And congratulations on your award. I think that is, yeah, wonderful. What an accolade.
The story isn't done yet, though. You slipped there a second ago. In my mind, the story's not done yet because I want to know more about Charlotte. I want to know more about the new leader of our world. I want to know more about Zhivago meeting his end. So, is there another book following this one?
Oh, 100%. I envision this to be a 3-book series originally, because it's my story. I say it's my story. So I know how long the story is, and I know what's involved with telling that story. So I envision a three novels. And in fact, the first iteration was the one that I left with a cliffhanger ending that Emily said, no, you got to finish this off. So I wrote the first 4 chapters of the second book, the sequel, and tacked them onto the back end of the first one, Call Me Hunter.
Oh,
just
really?
to wrap it up a little better. And Emily, she's right. I mean, I'm just in awe of her abilities. It's just genius. And she said, look, if you're Stephen King, you can leave it cliffhanger. If you're one of the Patterson, you can leave a cliffhanger, and everybody will accept it and buy it. She said, your first time novelist debut, don't even think about it. So, which is fair enough. So,
yeah, fair point.
And as you know, there's unanswered questions, and I left it exactly like the story is, that you can't do it. When are you going to have 1,200 page novel? So I will write all that in the sequel, and because I've lived it, I'll just sit down and write the story. It doesn't it'll take a few months for sure.
You did mention earlier that you challenge your readers to do the research of all of the different things that you put in there, all of the links back to history of all the people who did this and all of a sudden showed up here, and the lunch with Lonnie Anderson and Elizabeth Montgomery. The one that I had to ask you about is, did you really party with Tom Selleck and Gene Simmons on the set of Runaway in 1984?
Yeah, the rap party. Well, Gene Simmons and I did the partying. Michael Crutch. Yeah. I mean, I thought he was a great guy. I mean, as a much younger, Kiss. I mean, holy cow. That was, Beth, I hear you calling. I mean, this was Kiss. But, by then he was out of his makeup. I think that was about the first year, actually, that he was out of his makeup. And he was a good guy. He's a street guy. I mean, we had a lot in common. It's like Tommy Mottola. He's a street guy that, president of Sony Records, owned Casablanca Records, married to Mariah Carey. But when you talk to them, they're guys that have come up the street and learned. They're just good at what they do. And so I had a great time with them. And go ahead, ask him. I mean, he may or may not remember, but he had a girlfriend that was breaking up with, and my fiance at the time was in the ladies' washroom consoling her, and Gene and I were drinking beers.
What were you doing at the time that you were at the rap party?
I was dealing in ethnocentric and idiosyncratic folk forms of art from mostly Western Canada was my area of expertise.
Okay.
There's some religious sects out here, the Hutterites, Mennonites, they're like your Amish kind of, but these are Anabaptists, and the Doukhobors, the Ukrainian immigrants that came to Western Canada. So Country Living magazine, Rachel Newman wrote at least 3 articles on my collecting and collection back in the 80s.
I'm going to ask this. I was going to ask you what's scarier, but knowing Jim Shockey, my guess is you don't get scared very easily. So I'm going to ask it to you this way. What elicited more trepidation? I'm not going to use the word scary. Maybe staring down a 2-ton bull elephant that has the power of just stomping on you, or maybe sitting down to write this, actually write it, take the ideas from here to here, and seeing that blank screen. What was scarier?
Well, I mean, you're totally right. fear to me is a wasted emotion. It doesn't allow you to react in a given situation. Trepidation, I walked into, that is a good word, because I've been in many situations where, like trepidation was my number one emotion at that moment, and just being, heightened awareness, ready for whatever you got to deal with. Totally different from writing this novel. I never, there was no trepidation. I've been writing it in my head for every single mountainside I sat on, every, like I say in the preface, every customs office that I sat in for hours waiting for a firearm permit to get into Russia, without getting arrested. I mean, I was writing the novel, and so I'd honed the craft for decades. I've written, like I say, 1,000 articles. I knew how, I felt I was I was at a skill level where I could write it. Telling stories are as ancient as humans itself. If we really get inside who we tell stories, and so I wasn't afraid of that either. And I had a story to tell. I had my story to tell. So there was no trepidation. I think, I have no trouble setting a goal that's decades away and effort before you ever attain that goal. So sitting down, writing for 6 months or 8 months, a year, and going through the rewrite process, which I love, by the way. I've been loving every second of the whole to learn. It's a new thing for me to learn. I haven't done that before.
Yeah.
So I honestly, I never had any, certainly no fear and no trepidation and no, heightened awareness in life and death situations. You have to be aware. And I was asked one time, what's the scariest thing you've ever, or the most dangerous encounter, or whatever. And that's people. It doesn't matter anything, whatever it is. And I said, and I answered it, and our daughter Eva was there. She was listening. She said, that was the lamest answer ever, because I said, it's all the times that nothing happened. Where your senses, if you're switched on, if your instincts are firing like they should be, which we all have the capability if we put ourselves in those situations. If they're working, you don't take that next step, because every single molecule in your body is telling you, don't do it. Don't do it. Yes, you're attaining the goal means you want to take the step, but you have to put that aside, and you have to listen to your antecedents speaking to you from 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 5,000, whatever your faith is. You have to listen to that. So those situations that are the most dangerous are the ones you never actually took the next step, because you did the right thing. You stepped away, you walked away, and you came back another day to take up that fight.
Didn't you have one of those with a bear at some point in time? One of the interviews that I read or I was listening to, that you were close, you were in a brushy area, and you were going to take a step, but you decided not to. You backed out, and then the next day you came and found the bear in that spot you would have stepped in?
Yeah, exactly. It's so thick. You're in temperate rainforest, so you can't see your sound tracking, and whatever it is, you just, every hair on the back of your neck stands up. That's how they usually describe that feeling. But it's like and you something's really off, and you take that next step. If I would have taken that step that evening, I would be not talking to you, or if I would be talking to you, I'd still have bear spit all over my face. So it's, I didn't do it. But you come back the next day, and yes, then you realize, holy cow, if I'd have taken the next step there, the bear was waiting for me. So that's happened often in variations of that same theme.
You've talked about your daughter, and you've been lucky as a father of two girls. I know it would be fun to be able to work alongside my daughters, but both of them were smart enough not to go into television news for careers. But you've had the opportunity to work alongside your daughter, and I would call it a blessing to be able to do so. She took some criticism a while back for about a picture of a bear that that was shot here in North Carolina. As a dad, how angry did that get you? Did you have to kind of pull back and maybe not respond on social media and the such? But I would imagine as a dad, that would have really irked me. How did it do to you?
Really good question. when you put yourself out in the public, I mean, I'm going to get crucified just from this interview for things I've already said in the interview, the way I'm dressed, this guy, whatever he is, I'm toxic masculinity, whatever. If you're going to be out in the public, you have to also shoulder the responsibility of being able to understand that these people hate you for what you stand for, not for who you really are. And it's not you. You know who you are. Your friends know who you are, what you believe in, and if you live your life, honestly, honorably, chivalrously, things that I respect. Maybe some people don't nowadays, but if you live true to yourself, then nobody can really, they can't hurt you. Arrows, slings. I think she had 2,000 death threats in the next 24 hours after she posted that picture. And it got down to where they were, wish your little dog, who she had a little puppy at the time, would die a horrible death. I mean, these are people that are twisted, mutated on, they've lost touch with humanity, because nobody wishes that on anybody. There's nobody, our daughter would never wish that on them, no matter what they did. You try and understand, look for the one good thing in them, and then with that common ground, you find a consensus, you get along, tolerate, you don't judge. But so when before she ever went into it, I said, listen, I'm a guy, and I wear a cowboy hat, and I talk a certain way, and I have a certain confidence, of self-reliance that is kind of an irritation to them, but I'm not a threat. I'm not a threat, because you can write me off as, like I say, toxic masculinity, whatever, this guy's got issues. But a young lady who's articulate, who's educated and beautiful, who's passionate about something, and is, has the right demeanor, is honest. When she speaks honestly. That makes her a threat. She is a threat to them. And I warned her. I said, what are they going to do with me? Send me home? But they need to shut you down, and they'll be coming after you like you never imagined, and you better be ready for it. So just, my reaction isn't, to get in a mudslinging match on social media. I mean, once in a while, if someone does something, I'll take them to task. I'll do one of my posts. This will be a long one, and I'll explain, kind of with humor, hopefully. I think it's funny, but maybe other people don't. But there's enough response that it touches a chord that, you have to, you let them do what you do, and then don't be like an oak getting pounded by a hurricane. You get blown over, branches break off. Be a willow, and just take it, and then, because they go away. They don't live it. They don't live it. They don't like the idea of it, but then they're off to do their cafe lattes at Starbucks. They're not. No offense to everybody that does cafe lattes at Starbucks. I like Starbucks cafe lattes, but they're not going to be there forever, and you'll see. You'll still be there standing, and they'll be gone with because they didn't. You can't cancel you, because you're just you. You are you. So I didn't. Those people, I feel sorry for them. I honestly do, because they have to live in that ugly world of hate.
I've reached out to your daughter to see maybe if she would be a guest on the podcast moving forward, because now I know she lives in the Raleigh area, so she's got a tie directly to North Carolina. What does Jim still want to do that Jim hasn't done yet? And I imagine that list is very short, because you've done and gone almost everywhere on God's green earth. But what's on Jim's list that he hasn't done that he wants to accomplish?
Well, I mean, immediately the sequel to Call Me Hunter. And then I've toyed, a long time I've thought about politics. I think if you let other people run your world and don't get involved, and I don't know about down where you are, but where we are here, it's people that are they don't have jobs. They're kind of shiftless. That's an easy thing to get into, because they throw their name in a hat and they represent a side. And they get elected, and then they're making decisions for you, for me, for all of us, for our families. But their intent was never for the community. It was kind of their own ideology that they're promulgating by getting elected. And And who needs it? You think about it and go, I don't want to get into it because I'm going to get attacked. They're going to come at me and expose me, whatever. And people that have the ability just say, I don't want to do it. But you do that, you end up what we have nowadays. And I can't speak for down south because politics are country, and but here in Canada, I'm talking municipal level, provincial level, and federally. So I've toyed with it. I was asked 30 years ago, but and I would have won at that time because it was a sweep by the one party. But I went through all the vetting process, and they asked me. They didn't even have anybody running in this constituency, but I talked to my wife and I said no, and I didn't want Louise. Louise is too beautiful, or was too beautiful to that's not fair for them to attack her, and throw whatever paint on her, whatever they do, spit on her. I mean, that would just. But now Louise is gone, and I think I can help. I don't know, maybe it's naive, but if enough people stand up and put their names into the hat, and that doesn't mean I'm going to get elected. It doesn't mean I'm even going to get nominated for the party, in the local constituency. But I think we have to start thinking that it's not about money anymore, and it's not about me. It's about our community. We have to look after, at least make an effort to make things, fix things, make it better. And again, tolerance. Like, instead of this divided, I hate you. We need to find a consensus somewhere in the middle and say, okay, this is a smart person. This is a smart person. Let me hear the sides. And if you trust me, I'll make a decision based on something that's not ideology. It'll be based on what I think is best for everybody. And maybe it means taking cod liver oil. My grandmother, she'd feed me cod liver oil and say, I hated it, but it was good for me. And sometimes that's what you have to do, is take the cod liver oil. So I don't know, politics, thought of that, but I've got 4 grandchildren too. And, if I just can't imagine living life without a goal. If this Call Me Hunter gets to be a big enough bestseller, then maybe I'll do 5 more novels. Certainly I could do it. I just, then that'll be my goal.
Zhivago is dead. I hunted him down and I killed him. Does it belong with some of the best first lines in thriller history or in publication? I mean, it takes you, it grabs you. It did me, and it just kind of said, okay, let's go.
Yep.
Buckle in. Here's an adventure that you're not going to want to miss.
It's if you're asking me, I mean, my dad he would come right back from the grave and kick me in the tail if I started bragging and saying, I think it is. He would say, it's humility, always, humble. Don't. So I'm not the right person to ask, because, I can't judge my own work like that. But I will tell you that my sister, who was a librarian, and her and I, she was my best man at my wedding when I was married to Louise 39 years ago. And we were very close. She has read more books than virtually anybody I know. That's what she does. And we, went for a period, in her mind, like, she truly is not socialist, but she's very, on that side, don't need a big footprint, you walk, rather, and she always, I think, felt for about 3 decades that I had a pretty big footprint in my life on this planet. So we kind of, we didn't really find a lot in common until I sent this manuscript back to her, or to her. And I said, Jolene, would you read this? And it was like we'd been like this. She was my best man again at that point. And that was the catalyst that brought us back together talking. And my point is that she's a fairly qualified reader. And she was all in right from the first words of Call Me Hunter. She said the same thing, and because she's a much more of a scholar in that regard, she named off all the different starting lines of the various novels, the Moby Dick, and she said that.
I've had the opportunity to visit Bouchard Gardens up your way. My wife and I took a cruise. The next time we come back up that way, I am going to make it a point to go into the Hand of Man Museum because of everything I've seen, everything I've read. It's a place that is now on my list to visit. Bouchard Gardens was on my wife's list when we made our trip to Alaska, and now your museum is a place that's now on my list to visit.
Perfect. It's only an hour north of Victoria where the ferry terminal is, or the cruise ships come in, so it's easy to get to. I will make sure I'm here, and I'll sign a copy for you personally, probably the second one by then, unless you're planning to come up here soon.
Well,
I'd love to have you here.
I, again, can't speak highly enough of Call Me Hunter, Jim Shockey. It is a great, great book. I'm already looking forward to part 2 of the 3-part series. I know you're busy. I appreciate you taking the time to join us. Congratulations, and thanks for being here on the One-on-One with Jon Evans podcast, Jim.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and it's an honor. Truly, truly is. I read your bio beforehand, and I'm a big fan now, so I appreciate that you have me on.
A huge thank you to Jim Shockey for taking time out of his very busy schedule to join us for this week's podcast interview. Call Me Hunter is available right now. Get out and find it. It's a great read. You won't be disappointed. You can follow Jim on social media. He's active on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter, now called X. And if you want to know all about all of his adventures, go to jimshockey.com. Now, before we go, I'd like to ask you a favor. Please follow or subscribe to the One-on-One with Jon Evans podcast on whatever app you use to listen to your favorite shows. And if you would be so kind, please leave us a rating or a review. We do want to know what you think of our interviews. And the more feedback we have from friends like you, the higher we'll be listed on the apps, and the better chance we'll have of bringing in even more new listeners. I'm Jon Evans. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's episode of One-on-One.